Hi there! It looks like it's Christmas again, and although it's a time of year for celebrating and spending time with family, it's also a time for remembering our beloved departed souls. And so today we're going to be making a memorial wreath, so let's get started with that. So you need to start with this wire wreath ring, which you can normally get from most garden centres or online. And these generally come in different sizes. I normally opt for a 10 inch, but you can get them in an 8 inch or a 12 or 14 inch if you do want a different size. Along with some of this binding wire, which is also known as reel wire. And then you want to start by wrapping the end of your binding wire around a section of the wire ring. Now you need to start attaching the Sphagnum Moss, which you can usually find in bags from most nurseries or a florist supplier. Now you want to start attaching this in large clumps, so just keep pulling pieces off, putting it onto the ring, and then you're binding it on quite tightly with the binding wire. And when you move on to your next section of moss, just make sure you butt that up nice and tightly to the last section you've just done. And now just carry on with this process the whole way around the ring, just making sure that the moss is fairly consistent in thickness the whole way round. Once you've finished mossing the whole way round the ring, just go around again with the binding wire just to make sure it is properly secure, and at this point you can add in any extra pieces of moss in any areas you feel are a little bit thin. Now, leaving your binding wire attached, it's time to start adding in the foliage. Now you can buy some foliage from your local florist or nursery, or if you want to go out with a basket in the woods and do some foraging, I'm not going to stop you. You need to look for some hardy type of foliage. Things with woody stems like spruce or conifer are great for this. You can use things like eucalyptus, but they do tend to dry out quite quickly, so I would personally avoid these. As you can see, I'm cutting up my foliage into lengths of about 3 to 4 inches. You want to make sure that your moss is quite wet so that it doesn't dry out too quickly, but at the same time you don't want it that wet that you're working with a really dripping wet ring. Now to start adding the greenery, just work with 2 to 3 pieces at a time, angle the stems slightly down into the moss, and then bind these on with the wire going around 2 to 3 times. I like to alternate between different types of foliage to give a more mixed look once it's finished. but if you want to use all of the same foliage you can. As you can see, I am binding on a section to the outer edge of the wreath first, and then moving on to the inner side. Try to select smaller pieces for the inner edge and then chunkier pieces towards the outer. Once you get to the last section, this bit can be a little bit fiddly because you need to try and lift up the first pieces of foliage out of the way to bind on the last pieces. Now turn the wreath upside down and cut off the binding wire, and then to secure this in place, just coil it a few times around a section of the wire wreath ring, and then push the sharp edge back up into the moss to make sure there's no dangerous pointy bits. And now your lovely plain green wreath is finished, and it looks really lush at this stage. And you can either decorate it now as a door wreath, but what we're going to do today is turn it into a holly wreath for a memorial. Now to add in our holly, we're going to be using this stub wire. I tend to use an 18 or 20 gauge wire for this, as it's quite thick and sturdy and will just hold everything securely in place. So just holding a couple of pieces of holly together and then creating a sort of hairpin shape with the wire around the stems. You want to make sure one side is shorter than the other, and then take the longer side of the wire and wrap that around both the stems and the shorter piece of wire. I hope that makes sense. You need to make sure that you wrap the wire around the stems really quite tightly so that the holly can't fall out. Now stab the end of the wire through the wreath, right through the moss, out of the back, and then turn the wreath upside down and pull the wire securely into place, and then bend the end of the wire and push that back up into the moss. And then just repeat this all the way round until you have as much holly as you wish to have in your wreath. And now using the same technique, I'm just adding in a little bit of ivy as an extra. And now for a bit of extra decoration, I'm just adding in some pine cones. So to wire these in, you need to try and fiddle the wire in between some of the pines on the cone. Again, with one side of the wire longer than the other. Pull that down, and then you want to hold the wire firmly and then twist the cone with the other hand until you feel it tighten up. And then just secure these to your wreath in the same way as we did before, and this is what mine looked like when it was finished. Have a very Merry Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year.